tonight we leave the well-trodden paths of castles and cathedrals for a realm of whispering currents and shifting mists. Tonight, you don the worn wool of a working soul, your cathedral the vault of a star-chilled sky, your castle a gently rocking hull of tarred oak. You are a medieval ferryman, and the next 10 hours are a silent treaty with the dark. The world you know, the world of sun, song, and society, has closed its shutters. In its place is the river, a black silk ribbon unraveling through the sleeping countryside. You can hear it, a liquid murmur against the bank, a sound that is less a noise and more a cold, damp feeling in the ears. The far shore is a rumor, a thicker blackness against the black. You light your single, guttering candle lantern, its light not pushing the dark back but simply carving out a tiny, fragile room within it, a room that moves. This is your domain. You'll learn its laws, its ghosts, its economics of shadows. It's a beautiful, lonely vigil. And you should know, right now, that between the cold, the current, the opportunistic thieves, and the very real chance of simply vanishing into the deep, you probably won't survive this. Most who did were built of grizzled patience and a cynical wit. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The weight you feel first isn't fatigue, but the wool of your cloak, already beaded with moisture from the mist rising off the water. It smells of wet sheep, wood smoke, and the stale, fishy aroma of the river itself, a scent you will come to know as intimately as your own. Your hands, resting on the rough-hewn gunwale, are maps of this life, callous from the oar, nicks from patching leaks with tar and rag, a permanent chill in the knuckles that even summer won't fully erase. You've banked the small, clay-lined fire in the shore hut, leaving only embers. Your world now is this boat, a flat-bottomed, pragmatic craft called a back, designed for stability, not speed. It's about 20 feet of stubborn longevity, and every groan of its timbers is a familiar conversation. You check your gear by feel. The great sweep oar, locked in its stout wooden crutch at the stern. The setting pole, leaning against the hut wall, your probing staff for shallow, reedy stretches. A coiled rope, rough as a lizard's back. And the toll box, iron-banded and locked, where you'll drop the coins paid by your nocturnal passengers. Its key hangs on a thong around your neck, a cold little secret against your chest. This is the entirety of your office. There's no grand license hanging here. Your right to operate comes from the local lord, yes, but it's maintained by the simple, unspoken fact that you know this stretch of river in the dark better than anyone alive. You are a necessary utility, like a well or a bridge, but one that can think, and bargain, and be afraid. A mainstream historical fact to anchor us. Ferrymen were part of a vast, essential network of medieval transport. While kings and knights rode great horses on paved Roman roads, 90% of all goods and ordinary people moved by water. Rivers were the motorways of the Middle Ages, and you, in your little boat, are a vital on-ramp, a living link between isolated communities. Your ferry might be the only crossing for miles, making you not just a laborer, but a geographic pivot point. That toll box? It might not just hold coins. Historians digging through manor accounts find payments to ferrymen in bizarre forms. A dozen eggs, a promise of 2 days hay mowing, a basket of eels, even a particularly good wedge of cheese. The economy wasn't just monetary, it was deeply social, a barter of favors and futures. You might accept a poor widow's prayer for her soul as payment, knowing the local priest is your next passenger and might be persuaded to forgive a tithe. It's all about fluid capital. And here's where the debates begin. Historians still argue whether ferrymen were respected craftsmen or seen as shady, liminal figures. You are essential, but you operate in the literal and social twilight. You touch money, you work while good Christians sleep, you traffic with strangers and secrets. Are you a trusted pillar of the community, or a necessary rogue? As you stand there, feeling the first deep chill of the night seep into your boots, you realize the answer is probably both, and that tightrope is the one you'll walk until dawn. The silence out here isn't empty, it's a held breath. It's the rustle of a water vole in the sedge, the distant, mournful kerplonk of a feeding fish, the almost imperceptible sigh the wind makes as it slides over the water's skin. You've learned the difference between the quiet of an empty night and the quiet of a watched one. Your ears are doing the work of your eyes, painting a sound map of the bank. So when the sudden, frantic hammering starts, a fist on the door of your shore hut, not a polite knock but a panicked drumming, your body reacts before your mind. Your heart, which had settled into the slow, cold rhythm of the river, lurches like a startled animal. The sound is a violent tear in the fabric of the night. This is the night's first customer. And rule one of the ferryman's code, unwritten but graven in bone-deep experience, is that no one comes to the river at this hour unless their business cannot wait for the sun. Urgency is a give. So is secrecy. You don't immediately rush to the hut. You blow out your candle lantern, plunging your little world into profound black. You listen. Is the hammering alone? Are there hushed, arguing voices? The scuff of multiple feet on gravel? The metallic whisper of a weapon being drawn? You become a lump of shadow in the boat, waiting for the scene to declare itself. The hammering stops. A tense silence follows, even heavier than before. Then a single, low voice, strained with impatience. "Ferryman, by the saint's blood, are you dead in there?" You relight your lantern, its flame now feeling dangerously revealing. A moment. You call, your voice rough with disuse. You pole the boat the few feet to the bank, the gravel crunching under its weight. Securing the line to a rotted stump, you step ashore, the solid ground feeling oddly unstable. The figure by your hut is a blot of deeper darkness, shrouded in a cloak, shifting weight from foot to foot. As you approach, the lantern light washes over him. It's a young man, maybe a merchant's apprentice by the cut of his still fine, though now mud-spattered, tunic. His face is pale, eyes wide, flicking constantly back over his shoulder into the woods. He smells of sweat, fear, and horse. "I need to cross. Now." It's not a request. It's a plea wrapped in a demand. You give your standard, slow reply, playing the simple, dull-witted boatman. "Crossing's a halfpenny. After sundown, it's a penny." He fumbles in a purse, thrusts a silver penny at you, overpayment, a sign of his panic. "Just move." You pocket the coin, its cold metal a tangible piece of the night's mystery. "Boat's here." He practically leaps aboard, making the back rock alarmingly. You cast off and take up the sweep oar. With a deep, grating push against the bank, you're back on the black water. The mainstream historical fact here is the curfew. Most medieval towns and villages enforced a strict curfew, the ringing of the curfew bell signaling that all gates were shut, all hearths should be covered, and all honest folk should be indoors. This young man isn't just late, he's illicitly outside the walls, which marks him as either a criminal, a fugitive, or someone on a master's secret errand. He huddles in the bow, a bundle of jangling nerves, as you work the oar in its crutch, the rhythmic splash creak the only sound. You don't ask questions. That's another part of the code. The river's anonymity is a service you provide. But his bursting with it, the story pressing against his teeth. "My master's factor in the next town," he whispers, though there's no one to hear for miles. "He's been taken with a fever. The shipment of Flemish wool arrives at dawn. The contracts, they must be sealed, or we lose the season's bond." It's a plausible tale. It might even be true. Medieval commerce ran on a complex system of credit and personal pledges. A missed meeting wasn't just rude, it could bankrupt a merchant, as his word and his credit were the same thing. This boy isn't carrying goods, he's carrying his master's reputation, which is far more valuable. Halfway across, he stiffens. Do you hear that? You stop rowing. You listen. For a moment, there's nothing. Then, faint but clear from the distant bank you just left, the jingle of harnesses and the soft snort of a horse. Pursuit? Or coincidence? You meet his terrified gaze in the lantern's gloom. Historians still argue whether the feudal system's strict controls on movement were primarily for safety or for economic control. Were curfews and tolls about preventing crime, or about ensuring everyone, and every transaction, passed through authorized, taxable channels? As you resume rowing, slower now, quieter, you understand it's both. You are, in this moment, both his savior and a potential agent of the very system he's evading. The river, for now, is a neutral zone. But it won't last. The jingling fades into the general murmur of the night, absorbed by distance and the river's white noise. Your passenger remains a coiled spring until the bow grinds softly into the far bank's reeds. He's out before you can secure the line, tossing another penny onto the thwart, a silent, desperate tip, and melts into the copse of alders without a backwards glance. You're alone again. The silence rushes back in, but it's a different silence now, charged by the brief, human drama. It leaves a residue, like the smell of his fierce sweat still hanging in the damp air. You pocket the second coin, the weight in your purse a counterbalance to the lightness of your vanished cargo. This is the rhythm, the intrusion of urgency, the performance of passage, the return to solitude. Now, with the bank a dark smudge behind you, you are truly in the realm of your tools. You settle amidships, the boat stable beneath you, and take up your primary companions for the long haul, the oar and the pole. These aren't just pieces of wood, they are extensions of your senses, the physical vocabulary of your dialogue with the water. The great sweep oar, its loom smooth and dark from the oil of 10,000 palms, rests in its wooden clavis, the oarlock. You wrap your hands around it, and the fit is perfect, a worn groove for every finger. This is the muscle of your work. A single, long blade dips into the unseen water astern. You push, not with your arms alone, but with your back, your legs braced against the hull's frame. The boat responds with a grudging, ponderous slide. Splash, creak, swish. It's a tired sound. This oar moves tons of displacement with every stroke, a battle of leverage against inertia. It's for the deep, open channels, for maintaining heading in a subtle current, for the long, mind-numbing stretches where the river decides to be polite and wide. But the river is rarely polite for long. That's where the setting pole comes in. Leaning against the gunwale, it's a slender spear of ash, maybe 12 feet long, shod with an iron spike at one end and a rounded knob at the other. You take it up now, moving to the bow. In the shallow, reedy margins or where sandbanks lurk like sleeping monsters just beneath the surface, the oar is useless. Here, you become a gondolier of the gloom. You plant the spiked end into the murky bottom, feel it bite, clay, gravel, soft mud, and then you walk your hands down the shaft, putting your whole body weight into it, pushing the boat forward with a series of deliberate, poling steps. It's intimate, invasive work. You're probing the riverbed's secrets, feeling the grind of a buried pot, the slimy resistance of a weed bed, the sudden, heart-stopping lack of resistance where a deep hole opens up. A mainstream historical fact, the design of these flat-bottomed ferries, or backots, and their propulsion methods, are ancient technologies that saw almost no major change from the early Middle Ages right through to the 18th century. The Romans used virtually identical craft. Your tools are the tools of your great-great-grandfather, and of his before him. Innovation is a luxury for sunlit trades. That iron spike on your pole? It's not just for pushing. On a really slow night, you might use it for fishing of a different sort. Dragging it along a soft bottom, you can sometimes hook and retrieve lost items. A dropped knife, a cookpot, a rusting buckle. Once, a ferryman upstream from you famously snagged a corroded but still recognizable Roman cavalry helmet, which he then used as a chamber pot for years until a passing antiquary nearly fainted at the sight and bought it for enough silver to retire the ferry. Your pole is a potential lottery ticket, one slow scrape at a time. But this tactile intimacy with the river's underbelly leads to scholarly friction. Historians still argue whether the medieval ferryman was a master of local hydrography, mentally charting every shoal and snag, or whether he relied on a more brutal, reactive method of simply knowing the general channels and dealing with groundings as a routine occupational hazard. Are you a pilot or a drudge? As you switch from oar to pole and back again, feeling the difference between the muscle-deep fatigue of rowing and the sharp, attentive strain of poling, you know the answer is both. You have a map in your head, yes, but it's a map drawn in memories of past mistakes, of sudden loaches and frantic, muddy shoveling in the dark. The river redraws itself after every flood. Your expertise isn't in knowing a fixed path, but in constant, silent conversation with a partner who never speaks, only pushes back. You stow the pole, returning to the oar's rhythmic embrace. The encounter has passed, its energy dissipating like the rings from a thrown stone. Now, the real work of the night begins, the communion with the dark. Your eyes, after an hour on the water, have given up. They've exhausted their limited vocabulary of greys and blacks, reporting only a formless void. So you dismiss them. You close your lids, feeling the slight, gritty burn of fatigue. When you open them again, nothing has changed. It's a liberating surrender. Now, you listen. The river has a language, and you are its somnolent student. It's not one voice, but a parliament of whispers, gurgles, and sighs. The splash creak swish of your own oar is the baseline, your heartbeat. But under it, around it, flows the water's own news. 2 yards off the starboard bow, a soft, continuous shiz tells you of a gravel bank sloping gently up from the deep. The sound is the current being combed through thousands of tiny stones. You adjust your stroke, pulling a fraction harder on the port side to edge away. A moment later, a low, hollow gloop, gloop, directly ahead signals a different danger. A deadfall, a tree submerged just beneath the surface, its branches reaching up like skeletal fingers to clutch at your hull. The sound is the water being sucked down into the tangled wood and released in burbling sighs. You backwater twice, the oar protesting, and skirt wide, giving the unseen snag a respectful bow. Then there's the sound of depth, or the lack of it. The deep channel has a quiet, resonant hum, a bass note felt in the soles of your feet as much as heard. The shallows have a brighter, chattering gossip, a frantic hiss over sand and pebbles. Your ears, now your primary navigational instrument, paint a sonic landscape. You're piloting by echolocation, using the river's own voice as your guide. A mainstream historical fact underpins this. Before standardized charts or lighthouses for inland waterways, this oral tradition of navigation was the only chart that existed. Knowledge of currents, sandbars, and snags was passed from ferryman to apprentice, from father to son, in descriptions of sounds and feels. It was a living, dying library. If you drowned without passing it on, that knowledge drowned with you. On a perfectly still night, you can sometimes taste your location. A bend in the river might pass by a particular clay bank that, when wet, releases a distinct, mineral tang on the air, like licking a wet stone. Another stretch might smell of the wild mint that grows thick on a sunny berm, a sweet, clean shock in the damp air. Or, less pleasantly, you might catch the sulphurous reek of a peat bog draining into the water, the scent of the earth's own digestion. Your nose becomes a crude but effective landmark. This reliance on non-visual senses ties into a broader historical debate. Historians still argue whether the medieval world was, in practice, a profoundly darker place than we imagine, forcing a hyperacuity in hearing and smell, or whether people simply accepted the limits of the night and moved less, did less, risked less. Were you, the night ferryman, an exception, a specialist in darkness, or were you simply applying a heightened version of senses everyone used once the sun set? As you drift for a moment, or raised, listening to the specific plink-plonk of water dripping from the blade that tells you're in a sheltered, slow-moving eddy, you feel the answer is the former. This isn't a general skill. This is a hard one, specific literacy. You're not just hearing water, you're reading it. The difference between the sound of a trout rising and the sound of a water rat slipping off a bank is the difference between a comma and a period in the river's sentence. Misread one, and you merely miss a bit of nature's theater. Misread the other, the sound of a submerged log versus a soft sandbar, and you spend the next hour cold, wet, and heaving your livelihood off a mud bank as the sky pales towards dawn. The night isn't just a time of day for you. It's a medium you have learned to swim in, and its primary dialect is sound. The river's language is suddenly punctuated by a new sound, a low, fluting whistle, 2 notes descending, like a curious blackbird. But it's too late for birds, and this whistle comes from the starboard bank, from the deep shadow under a willow whose branches trail in the water like a maiden's hair. You freeze, the oar poised above the dark mirror. The sound isn't a question. It's an announcement. A calling card. You let out a slow breath, watching it fog in the lantern light. The unofficial toll collectors have arrived. You don't reply. Instead, you backwater gently, angling the boat's bow towards the source of the sound. This is a dance with steps as formal as any courtly pavan. You nudge the boat into the willow's shadow, the world disappearing into a curtain of leaves. The lantern light is now a private, guilty secret, illuminating the gnarl of roots and the slow swirl of water. A figure detaches itself from the greater darkness, crouched on a root like a frog. You can't see his face, just the shape of a hood, the glint of eyes. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't need to. His presence here, now, is the threat. "Evening, passage master," he says, his voice a dry rustle. "Quiet night." "Quiet enough," you grunt, playing your part of the weary, simple boatman. A man could get lonely. A man might appreciate a little company. A little insurance for his quiet. He extends a hand, palm up. It's not empty. It holds a small, rough clay cup. You know the ritual. You take the toll box key from around your neck, unlock the box, and fish out 2 pennies. You drop them into his cup. They land with a soft clink. He withdraws his hand, the coins vanishing into a sleeve. "Good journey," he murmurs, and melts back into the root work. You push off, heart hammering but face a placid mask. This isn't a robbery, it's a transaction. He is a riverside taxman, a representative of the local band of vagrants, broken soldiers, or perhaps even a petty lord's disgruntled huntsman running a side hustle. His insurance is your guarantee that your rope won't be cut tonight, your hut won't be burnt, and you won't find a dead sheep rotting in your boat tomorrow morning. A mainstream historical fact. This kind of petty, organized extortion was endemic along poorly policed trade routes. Local authorities often turned a blind eye if it kept the peace and didn't target important people. You are a small business owner, and this is your protection racket, medieval style. Your toll box feeds 2 masters, the distant lord who owns the ferry rights, and the nearby shadow who owns the night. The detail is in the cup. It's not just for coins. Sometimes, if you're short on cash, you might pay in other liquidity. A portion of the hard cheese from your pouch. A promise to carry a message downstream on your next run. A flask of the rough, throat-scouring ale you keep under the thwart. Once, you paid with a pair of woolen socks your sister knitted, which the shadow man accepted with a grunt, his feet likely just as cold and wet as yours. The economy of the night is breathtakingly flexible. This grey market system sparks endless scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these informal tolls and protections were a parasitic drain on the medieval economy or a vital, alternative system of order and service provision in places where formal authority was absent or corrupt. Was the man in the willow a criminal, or was he providing a real service, security, for a fee, in a world where the sheriff visited once a season if you were lucky? As you row away, the weight of the 2 pennies gone from your box but the weight of anxiety slightly lifted, you lean towards the latter. He is part of the ecosystem. He is a predator, yes, but one that understands if he kills all the prey, he starves. You have an understanding. It's unfair, it's intimidating, but it is, in its own crooked way, a kind of law. The river's law. You just paid your dues. Clear of the willow's domain, you slip back into the main channel, the encounter leaving a metallic taste in your mouth, like you've bitten a coin. The night stretches on, a vast, dark yawn. This is when the second purpose of your vessel emerges, one no Lord's Charter mentions, the floating confessional. The anonymity of the mist-shrouded boat, the fact that you are a stranger who will be gone by dawn, turns your humble back into a place of unburdening. You are the ear that will never see, the silent witness who cannot bear testimony. Your next passenger is a woman. She emerges from the reeds not with panic, but with a slow, weary determination, a basket over her arm. She pays her penny, her hand trembling slightly, and settles in the bow, drawing her shawl tight. You push off. For a long time, there's only the sound of the oar. Then, as if speaking to the river itself, she begins. Her voice is low, haunted by the fog. My daughter, she's to be married come Lammas. To the chandler's son. You make a non-committal noise, a grunt of acknowledgement that asks for nothing but permits everything. He's a good boy. Steady. A pause, filled by the water's lap. But she cries at night. She's in love with the Fletcher's apprentice, you see. A boy with nothing but clever hands and a song. The story unfolds, a tale of parental duty, youthful passion, and the crushing weight of social expectation. She's not asking for advice. She's casting her secret, this familial knot of love and sorrow, into the black water between you, hoping the river will carry it away. You are merely the conduit. A mainstream historical fact here is the sheer lack of privacy in medieval village life. Walls were thin, communities were intertwined, and everyone knew everyone's business. The ferry, in this strange interim space between settlements, between night and day, was one of the few places where a person could speak a dangerous truth aloud without fear of the parish gossips. You provide a secular version of the confession booth, without the promise of absolution, but with a guarantee of silence. Sometimes, the confessions aren't sorrowful, they're downright salacious. You've heard which miller is cheating at the toll grain, which wife is meeting the tinker in the barley field, which novice monk snuck out to watch the traveling players. This gossip is a currency as valuable as coins. You never repeat it. That would violate the code and destroy the trust your trade relies on, but knowing it gives you a subtle, invisible power. You understand the hidden currents of human relationships just as you understand the hidden currents of the river. You become a repository of secrets, a walking, rowing archive of scandal that you must never, ever open. This role of confidential listener feeds directly into a simmering historical argument. Historians still argue whether the medieval concept of the self was more communal, with individual secrets being a rare and burdensome luxury, or whether people in the past harbored the same complex inner lives and private struggles we do today, simply with fewer outlets for expression. As this mother speaks of her daughter's hidden tears, her voice thick with a love that fights duty, you witness the profound interiority of a common woman. She is an individual, with private pain. Your boat isn't just carrying her across water, it's carrying the weight of her conscience. The night and the river granted temporary, fragile individuality, a moment to be a self with a secret, before she must return to being a mother, a wife, a villager at dawn. You offer no solution. You simply listen, and in that listening, you provide a service far more valuable than the penny in your box. When she disembarks on the far side, she doesn't thank you. She just nods, her face seeming a little lighter, the burden shared with the dark. She disappears into the pre-dawn haze, and her secret stays with you, another piece of flotsam caught in the net of your memory, to be released into the void of your own forgetting. The woman's scent, honey soap and hearth smoke, lingers for a few pulls of the oar before the river's damp erases it. The confessional closes. Your stomach, a forgotten organ during the tense or emotional passages, now reasserts itself with a low, grinding gurgle. It's the dead of night, that hollow hour where time seems to congeal. The fatigue is mental now, a woolly fuzz at the edges of your thoughts. To continue, you must fuel the machine. You ship the oar, letting the boat drift gently in a known, slow-moving pool, and turn to the matter of midnight provisions. Under the stern thwart is your wallet, a sack of coarse canvas, not for coins, but for survival. You untie it, the familiar smells rising to meet you, damp linen, rye, fermentation, and salt. Your hand finds the shapes by touch. First, the bread. It's a small, dense loaf of muslin, a mix of rye and barley, baked 3 days ago. Its crust is hard as ship's biscuit, designed to survive the river's moisture. You tap it against the gunwale with a sound like knocking on a very old door. Breaking off a hunk requires effort, a satisfying crack. Inside, it's slightly doughy, tangy with sourdough yeast. It tastes of the earth, of grit, of sustenance stripped of all pleasure. You chew slowly, making your jaw work, washing each mouthful down with a swallow of small beer from a leather costrol. This isn't the heady ale of the tavern. It's a weak, slightly sour, low-alcohol brew, the liquid equivalent of your bread, hydration and a scant calorie boost, designed to keep you alert, not drunk. Next, the cheese. A thumb-sized wedge of something pale and crumbly, wrapped in dock leaves. It's sharp, salty, and leaves a coating on the roof of your mouth. This is your luxury. The main historical fact here is the sheer monotony and nutritional pragmatism of the working diet. For the lower orders, food was fuel, not experience. Your meal is portable, non-perishable, by the standards of the day, and provides slow-burning energy. The concept of a midnight snack as a treat is a modern fantasy. For you, it's a necessary refueling stop, as functional as greasing an axle. You're not alone in your hunger. The night shift on the river has its own economy. Eel pies, you've heard, are the legendary sustenance of the Thames watermen in London. Down there, piemen in skiffs would row up to working boats, selling hot, greasy pies from baskets, the eels caught from the very river they floated on. Here on your quieter stretch, the equivalent might be old Mab, the reed cutter's widow, who sometimes appears at the dusk landing with a basket of hard-boiled duck eggs or wrinkled winter apples, trading them for a copper or a promise to ferry her gossiping sister next market day. Your wallet might also contain a strip of dried, smoked fish, a pike or a perch you caught and cured yourself on a rare sunny afternoon. It's tougher than leather and tastes like salty river mud, but it's protein. This simple act of eating alone in the dark connects to a broader debate. Historians still argue whether the medieval laborer experienced constant, gnawing hunger as a background state of being, or whether a relatively stable, if boring, diet was achievable for those in steady work like a ferryman. Are you eating this hard bread because it's all you have, or because it's the practical choice for the job? As you chew, feeling the coarse grains grind between your teeth, you feel it's both. The bread fills the void, but it doesn't delight. It's a barrier against the ache in your gut, a reminder that your body is a tool that requires maintenance. You are a biological engine, and this is your coal. You finish the cheese, licking the salt from your fingers, and take a final pull of small beer. The meal is over in minutes. The hollow feeling is gone, replaced by a heavy, solid mass in your belly. It's not comfort, but capability. You wipe your hands on your hose, stow the wallet, and take up the oar again. The engine is refueled. The night, however, is only half done. The solid food sits in your gut like a ball of clay, a grounding weight as you push back into the current. The world has entered its deepest phase of darkness, the hour the monks would call the nocturnes, a time for prayer against the terrors of the soul. Out here, the terrors are less spiritual and more ambient. A new sound begins, a soft hissing at first, like 1,000 geese whispering. Then you see it, or rather, you stop seeing. A wall of fog is rolling down the river valley, a slow, silent avalanche of whiteness swallowing the world. In minutes, your lantern light is reflected back at you, a fuzzy globe that extends barely past the bow. The far banks vanish. The stars vanish. Even the sound of the water becomes muffled, deadened. You are in a cocoon of milk-white nothingness, a solitary bubble adrift in the void. This is when superstition bleeds into reality. When the familiar soundscape is stolen by the fog, the mind, fatigued and lonely, begins to populate the blank canvas. Every drip from the oar becomes a footstep on the water. Every odd swirl in the mist becomes a shifting form. This is the realm of phantoms. You've heard the stories, passed down with the solemnity of gospel around winter fires. The grindalow, a sinewy, green-fingered thing that lurks in deep pools, waiting to pull children under. The will-o'-the-wisp, the mischievous fairy light said to lead travelers into bogs. Could one drift over water? And then there are the human ghosts. The spectral Viking longship, its sail tattered, its oars moving silently, crewed by skeletons, a revenant of some ancient raid sailing in eternal patrol. Or the grey lady of the mill, who threw herself into the river over a faithless lover and is said to rise on foggy nights, seeking a ferryman to take her to the other side, her payment a clutch of water lilies that turn to mud by dawn. A mainstream historical fact anchors this. The medieval worldview made little rigid distinction between the natural and the supernatural. The world was enchanted. Rivers, forests, and fens were inhabited by spirits, good and ill. The fog wasn't just weather, it was a curtain drawn between worlds, making the unseen seen. Your fear isn't childish, it's a cultural reflex, an acknowledgement that you are in a liminal space, physically and spiritually. Some ferrymen actively cultivated these stories. A reputation for a haunted stretch could be good for business in a perverse way. It kept rivals from poaching your route. It explained strange sounds or delays to passengers. And sometimes, it provided the perfect cover. That ghostly Viking longship shimmering in the mist might just be a band of smugglers in a repurposed fishing boat, using the legend and the weather to move contraband without questions. The supernatural was a tool as usable as your oar. This interplay of fear and folklore sparks enduring debate. Historians still argue whether these folk beliefs were a genuine, pervasive terror that shaped daily behavior, or whether they were more like a shared cultural language, stories told for entertainment, comfort, or social control, with people able to switch between belief and skepticism as the situation demanded. As you peer into the formless white, your hand tight on the oar, you feel the truth is visceral. Right now, alone, with the world erased, The story of the Grey Lady feels intensely real. Your rational mind knows it's the fog playing tricks, the fatigue weaving tales. But your spine, the prickle on your neck, the part of you that is still a child of this supersaturated world, isn't so sure. You're not just fighting the current, you're fighting the collective imagination of every soul who has ever lived and died on these banks, their stories seeping into the very water and air. You row a little faster, the rhythmic motion a charm against the silence, your breath and the creak of the oarlock the only proofs you exist at all. The fog holds for an age, then begins to fray at the edges like rotting lace. The world seeps back in, damp and dripping. Your nerves, stretched thin by the spectral whiteout, are immediately presented with a new, earthly test. A signal. Not a whistle, not a call. A soft, rhythmic tapping from the bank, like a woodpecker with a sense of secrecy. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps. It comes from the hollow trunk of a lightning-blasted oak you use as a landmark. You let the boat glide towards it, your muscles tense with a different kind of anticipation. This is the prearranged signal. The illegal passenger. You don't speak as you nose the bow into the reeds beneath the oak. A figure slips from the tree's shadow, low and swift, and is aboard in one fluid motion, settling in the bottom of the boat, not on the thwart. You throw a rough sack of sacking over them, not for comfort, but for concealment. You push off and take up the oar, moving with a deliberate, normal pace. No hurry. Hurry draws the eye. The cargo under the sacking doesn't move, doesn't breathe audibly. It could be a person. It could be a bolt of Flemish cloth. It could be a pouch of uncut gemstones or a banned religious text. You don't know. You don't want to know. Knowledge here is danger. Your fee for this run, already paid in advance through a chain of silent intermediaries, is significantly higher than a penny. It's enough to cover your lord's toll for a week. This is the shadow economy's premium service. You are now a vital link in an underground network that operates parallel to the daylight world of markets and tithes. This is the mainstream historical reality. Smuggling and the evasion of tolls, taxes, and customs were rampant. Medieval regulations were porous, and enforcement was spotty. A ferryman with a flexible conscience was a crucial node. You might be carrying wool past a lord's monopoly, wine avoiding the king's customs, or a runaway serf seeking a town where residence for a year and a day could grant freedom. The river isn't just a road, it's a loophole. The most common illegal passenger wasn't a smuggler or a serf, but a priest. Not just any priest, but a chantry priest traveling to say private masses for a wealthy family without the knowledge, and thus the financial claim, of the local bishop. Or perhaps a friar from an unpopular order, moving between sympathetic households. The church had its own Byzantine internal tariffs and jurisdictions, and avoiding them was a holy art form. Your silent bundle might be clutching a chalice and pattern under that sacking, his sin not against man, but against ecclesiastical cash flow. This role places you at the heart of a persistent scholarly argument. Historians still argue whether this kind of low-level, ubiquitous law-breaking was a form of social resistance, the common people working the system to their minor advantage, or simply the inevitable friction of a pre-industrial economy trying to regulate complex human movement. Are you a rebel, or just a businessman catering to a niche market? As you row, feeling the extra, hidden weight in the boat's balance, you know you're neither. You're a professional. This is a job. The Lord's law says one thing. The reality of the river, and the silver in your secret purse, says another. You navigate between them as literally as you navigate between the banks. The morality is as fluid as the water you row upon. Your only code is discretion and reliable service. The night true currency isn't just pennies, it's trust and silence, and tonight, you are richly paid in both. You deliver your silent cargo at a preordained spot, a crumbling, half-drowned boathouse belonging to a long-abandoned manor. A hand emerges from the shadows, takes the sacking-covered bundle, and withdraws without a word. A second coin purse, heavier than the first, is left on the thwart. The transaction is complete. You are alone again, the first grey hints of false dawn smudging the eastern sky like a faint bruise. Your mind, however, is not empty. It's a mosaic. A jigsaw of whispers. The frantic apprentices talk of war contracts and fever. The mother's confession about her daughter's tears. A snippet you overheard last week from two carpenters complaining about the monastery's new roof timber being of inferior pine, not oak. The Shadowman's comment about strangers asking after the ford. The illegal passenger's mere existence. Piece by piece, without trying, you have become the unofficial news network of the river valley. You are a living, breathing, and highly unreliable medieval Reuters. You don't just transport bodies and goods, you transport information, often without meaning to. You connect the isolated manor to the market town, the monastery to the village, the outlaw to his contact. In a world where most news travels at the speed of a walking man or a cantering horse, you are a swift, silent conduit. The information is raw, unverified, and fragmented. A comment here, a worried sigh there, a furtive question about who's buying up all futures. You compile it all in the ledger of your memory. A mainstream historical fact. This was a fundamental function of travelers in a preprint society. Pilgrims, peddlers, carters, and yes, ferrymen were the internet. They carried news of battles, of harvests, of marriages and deaths, of prices and politics. Your version is hyperlocal, but no less vital. The village gossip might know who is sleeping with whom, but you might know which lord is in debt to which will merchant, information that could affect the price of mutton at the next fair. You don't just collect news, you curate it, based on your audience. For the garrulous blacksmith on a Tuesday morning crossing, you might mention the poor quality of the monastery's roof timber, a juicy bit of scandal about the powerful monks. For the quiet, devout widow, you would never mention it. For the merchant, you'd highlight the apprentice's story about the Flemish wool shipment, a data point in his mental market map. You are an algorithm of gossip, tailoring the feed based on perceived interest and your own social calculus. Sometimes, you trade information directly for other information, or for a discount on a pie. I'll tell you what I heard about the miller's new wife, if you knock a farthing off this crossing. This role as an information hub feeds a rich historical debate. Historians still argue whether the medieval public sphere was more fragmented and localized than we assume, or whether these informal networks created a surprisingly cohesive and rapid information web across regions. Were people parochially ignorant, or were they, through people like you, surprisingly well informed about events 30 miles away? As you sip your small beer, mentally sorting the night's intelligence, you feel it's both. The news is cohesive but biased, rapid but distorted. You are a node, but you are also a filter made of your own prejudices, your need to maintain peace, and your professional obligation to seem knowing but never too knowing. You know more than anyone suspects, and you understand less than you think. The truth is somewhere in the current between all the whispers, forever flowing just out of reach. The information mosaic fades as the immediate, grinding reality of the hour reasserts itself. The false dawn's grey light is a liar. True sunrise is still a long, cold wait away. This is the dead zone. The urgent passengers have crossed. The illicit ones are delivered. The fog has burned off. There is nothing but you, the boat, the water, and the enveloping, monotonous dark. This is your greatest enemy now, not danger, but boredom. A deep, soul-sapping tedium that threatens to dissolve your will as surely as sugar in hot tea. Your body is on autopilot, the oar moving in a mechanical, thoughtless rhythm. Your mind is a ship adrift, and if you don't give it a task, it will turn on itself with memories of warm beds or anxieties about roof thatch. So, you declare war on emptiness. You begin with memory games. You try to recall the name of every village on the river from source to sea, a list learned from a grizzled carter years ago. You count all the bridges you know. You try to remember the faces of every passenger from the last week, attaching a name or a fragment of story to each. When that fails, you turn to physical creation. From a pocket you pull a small knife and a piece of dry, soft willow you collected at dusk. Whittling. Your hands, guided by feel more than sight, shave away curls of wood. There's no goal, no figurine. It's the pure sacrament of process, the feel of the blade biting, the slow emergence of a shape from the formless block. You might make a toggle for a cloak, or a crude whistle, or just a pointy stick destined to be tossed into the river. The action itself is the prayer against madness. Then, there are the songs. You compose them in your head, terrible, rambling ballads only the river will ever hear. Oh, the miller's daughter had eyes of brown, and a temper to drown the whole town. You set the oars creak to a tune, a mournful, rhythmic dirge about eels, or mud, or the stupidity of sheep. You sing under your breath, your voice a rusty hinge in the silence. It's not art. It's auditory whittling, shaping sound to fill the void. A mainstream historical fact, the struggle against monotony was a defining feature of pre-industrial labor. Repetitive tasks, from weaving to plowing to rowing, were often accompanied by songs, chants, or rhythmic work calls not just for coordination, but for psychological survival. Your silly songs are part of a deep, human tradition of weaving a thread of meaning through the cloth of tedium. Some ferrymen you've heard of play elaborate mental games with the water itself. They pretend each ripple is a soldier, each floating leaf a ship, and wage entire naval battles in their heads, narrating the silent carnage as they row. The oak leaf galley approaches the reed ship flank. A volley of duckweed. She's foundering. It's absurd. It's necessary. Your mind is a muscle, and if you don't give it play, it will atrophy into a state of numb surrender, and a numb ferryman makes mistakes that end in drowning. This internal battle against boredom ties into a subtle scholarly controversy. Historians still argue whether the medieval mind experienced boredom as we understand it, or whether the constant physical labor and immediate material concerns of life left little room for such a modern, existential affliction. Were they too busy surviving to be bored? As you whittle your 10th pointless pointy stick, humming a tuneless song about a disgruntled badger, you can confirm the affliction is ancient. This isn't existential angst. It's a direct, tactical problem. A bored mind loses focus. A loss of focus on the river means a snagged hull, a missed landmark, a swamped boat. Your games are not luxuries. They are essential operational procedures, the mental maintenance required to keep the physical machinery running safely until the shift ends. The war against quiet isn't for comfort, it's for survival. Your mental badger ballad is interrupted by a faint, but definite, lightening in the east. Not the liar's grey of false dawn, but a gradual leaching of the black into a deep, cool blue. The stars are fading, not twinkling out, but dissolving like salt in water. This is it, the dawn. And it is the most dangerous time of all. Every sense you've spent the night sharpening is now betrayed by the light. Your ears are still your best tool, but your eyes are waking up, offering confusing, low-contrast information that distracts from the clear language of sound. The riverbanks solidify from looming shadows into tangible things, trees, huts, a grazing cow, but the details are soft, deceptive. This is when your guard, maintained through the long vigil, is at its lowest. The fatigue you've held at bay with whittling and songs now settles into your bones as a deep, cold weariness. Your reactions are slower. Your thinking is muddy. And the world is waking up to see you. The first threat is human. Bandits know this hour. They know a ferryman has been collecting tolls all night, that his box might hold a shimmer of silver. They also know you're tired, alone, and at your most visible yet most vulnerable moment, caught between night's anonymity and day's bustle. You watch the tree lines now not for spirits, but for the glint of a helm or the sudden flight of birds startled by men moving into position. The shadow man under the willow was predictable. Dawn marauders are not. A mainstream historical fact, robbery on the roads and rivers at dawn was so common it prompted specific laws. King Edward I of England, for instance, ordered that brush be cleared back 200 feet from major highways to reduce ambush opportunities. No such order protects your riverbank. You are exposed. Then there are the regulators. The Lord's bailiff or the town's market warden, fresh from his bed, might decide to make an early inspection, to catch you skimming from the toll box or carrying an unauthorized passenger. Your moment of settling accounts, which should be private, could become a public inquisition. The light reveals what the dark concealed. Finally, nature itself becomes treacherous. With the light, you can finally see the debris the night hid, the massive, waterlogged branch just subsurface. The fishing net strung from poles by some optimistic soul, now a ghostly, entangling web. The sandbank that has shifted since the last full moon. You've been navigating a map of sounds. Now you must reconcile it with a suddenly visible, and often contradictory, landscape. It's disorienting. A family of otters, playful in the first light, might decide your boat is a wonderful toy to bump and splash around, threatening to capsize you. A heron, startled from its pre-dawn fishing, might launch itself with a terrifying squawk and a clatter of wings right past your ear, a heart-stopping moment that could send you stumbling overboard. This perilous transition sparks a clear historical debate. Historians still argue whether the high incidence of dawn-time crimes and accidents was due to the tactical advantage of the light, or whether it was a symptom of a broader societal shift-change chaos, where the protections of the night watch ended and the order of the day watch had not yet fully begun. Are you vulnerable because you can be seen, or because you are stuck in the administrative and social crack between two worlds? As you pole past a particularly ominous-looking thicket, your hand resting on the knife at your belt, you feel it's both. The light giveth, and the light taketh away. It shows you the snag, but it also shows you to the sniper. You have one foot in the lawless, fluid night and one in the regulated, judgmental day, and you are balanced precariously over the cold, deep water between them. The dawn doesn't feel like a relief. It feels like the final, most demanding exam of your long, quiet night. No ambush comes. No bailiff awaits. The otters, for once, sleep in. You guide the boat to the home landing, the gravel crunching with a sound of finality. The sky is now a pale, watery blue, streaked with thin, pink clouds. The world has color again, but it's a washed-out, tired color. You secure the line with stiff, cold fingers, the simple knot taking 3 tries. The night shift is over. Now comes the accounting. You lift the toll box. It feels heavier than it should, or perhaps your arms are just that weak. You carry it into your shore hut, stirring the embers of the fire back to a feeble, flickering life. The light through the open door is enough. You sit on the stool, the box on the rough table, and insert the key. The lock clicks with a satisfying, metallic finality. You open the lid. The coins glint dully, a scatter of pennies, a few halfpennies, the rare silver groat from a merchant in a hurry. You begin to count, stacking them into little towers of 12. The physical tally is a meditation. This is the yield of the night's solitude and risk. But it's not all yours. First, you must separate the Lord's share. Usually, it's half. You count out the required pennies, feeling a familiar, dull resentment as you set them aside in a separate leather pouch. This is the rent for the right to do this backbreaking, lonely work. For the privilege of the night chills and the phantom fears. The pouch will be handed to the steward when he next passes, with a deferential nod. What remains is yours. But yours is a complicated term. From your share, you now mentally deduct the 2 pennies paid to the Willowman, your shadowy partner in peace. You set aside a few more coins for Mab, the egg woman, for you owe her for last week's supper. Perhaps a penny for the blacksmith, who fixed your pole's iron shoe and accepted an IOU. Your earnings are not a simple profit. They are a node in a web of small debts and reciprocal obligations. The remainder, a handful of coppers, is your wage. It might buy a new blanket, a pot, a good meal and ale at the tavern to forget the river for an evening. Or it might just vanish into the general fund of survival. A mainstream historical fact, this system of shares and dues was the bedrock of the manorial economy. Your ferry is a customary tenancy. You don't own the boat or the right, you hold it in exchange for service and a cut of the proceeds. You are a franchisee of the river. Your pocket holds the heavier purse from the illegal passenger. That is pure, untaxed profit. But it's also risk incarnate, a secret that must be hidden, perhaps buried, or converted slowly into goods that won't attract notice. And then there are the bartered items. Did the mother, in her emotional state, pay with a penny or with a beautifully woven ribbon from her basket, worth more to a peddler than the coin? Did the merchant's apprentice, in his panic, overpay? You check your personal pouch. Alongside the coins are the ribbon, a small, fragrant cake of soap from a previous crossing, and a promise of a haircut from the traveling barber next feast day. This is your real, fluid capital. This settlement process leads historians to a core debate. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasant or laborer was crushed by feudal dues, leaving them in perpetual poverty, or whether a savvy individual, through side hustles and careful management of the informal economy, could achieve a modest, sustainable living. As you look at the 2 piles, the Lord's definite, demanding share and your own smaller, more complex web of coins, goods, and promises, you see both truths. You are squeezed by the system, yes. But in the cracks of that system, in the darkness and the silence, you find space to maneuver, to negotiate, to survive. You are not rich. But you are, for now, solvent. You lock the Lord's share away, tuck your own gains into their various hiding places, and blow out the candle. The accounting is done. The night, officially, is closed. You step out of the hut, the world now fully illuminated in the flat, honest light of morning. The night's cloak has been lifted, revealing a scene of mundane bustle. The village is awake. Smoke curls from roof holes. The mill wheel is already turning with a steady, groaning complaint. A boy drives geese down the muddy track towards the common, their honking a raucous affront to your tired ears. You shoulder your gear and begin the trudge home, your body a catalogue of aches. The low burn in your shoulders from the oar, the tightness in your lower back from poling, a cold, damp numbness in your feet that has settled deep into the bone. You pass the day folk. Here is Will the Thatcher, already up a ladder, his arms full of straw, whistling a bright, annoying tune. He nods at you, a quick, curt movement. Long night, he asks, but it's not really a question, it's a statement of your otherness. You grunt in reply. There's Agnes the baker, her arms dusted white with flour, her face rosy from the oven's heat. She offers a sympathetic smile, but it doesn't reach her eyes. You are a creature of the damp and dark, and you carry the chill of it with you like a smell. Your pallor, your red-rimmed eyes, your slow, deliberate movements, they mark you as an outsider in the world of sun and sweat. This is the price of the night shift, paid in social coin. The day folk rely on you. They need the crossing for market, for visits, for trade, but they don't quite trust you. You work while they sleep. You traffic with strangers and secrets. You are liminal, belonging to neither the day's community of shared labor nor the night's world of honest rest. You are in between. A mainstream historical fact, nocturnal work was often viewed with suspicion in medieval society. It was associated with sin. Think of the proverb, all whores are by the light of the moon, with crime, and with supernatural danger. The Benedictine rule, which shaped much of medieval life, considered the night hours, the nocturnes, a time for prayer and spiritual warfare, not for worldly labor. Your job, by its very timing, exists on the edge of respectability. It affects your social life, or lack thereof. You're rarely at the tavern for the evening storytelling. You miss the Sunday afternoon games after Mass. When you're free, everyone else is working. When they are free, you're heading to the river. Your relationships are conducted in passing, in the transactional space of the landing. You're the subject of stories, not a participant in them. Did you hear the ferryman saw the grey lady again last full moon? They might whisper. You become a character in the village's folklore, which is a lonely way to be known. This social friction is part of a wider academic discussion. Historians still argue whether medieval communities were tightly knit, homogeneous groups where everyone knew their place, or whether they were riven with similar class, occupational, and temporal tensions that created invisible walls between people. Were you a valued member of a holistic village organism, or a necessary, slightly suspect utility, like a well that everyone uses but no one wants to live next to? As you nod to the carpenter, who gives you a look you can't quite read, is it pity? Disdain? You feel the latter. You are infrastructure. You are a piece of social machinery that operates on a different clock. The day folks' world is one of visible toil, shared meals, communal gossip in the light. Yours is solitary, shadowed, and conducted in whispers. The suspicion in their eyes isn't malice. It's the unease of the familiar towards the strange, the day towards the night. You walk through their waking world, but you are not truly of it. Your home, for now, is a pallet in a dark room, waiting. Your hut is a low, mean thing of wattle and daub, tucked behind a copse where the village gossip fades to birdsong. It smells of earth, wood smoke, and the ever-present, ghostly tang of the river on your clothes. You push the door shut, and the world narrows to this: a hearth cold and grey, a pallet of straw in the corner, a rough table with a chipped jug. The clamour of the day, the geese, the mill, the cheerful shouts, is muffled to a distant murmur. Here, in this dim silence, the night's work finally releases its claim on your muscles. The ache becomes a deep, heavy throbbing. The cold in your bones feels permanent. You don't bother with the fire. You don't eat. The ritual is one of divestment. You pull off your sodden boots, peeling away layers of damp wool hose. Your cloak, heavy with the night's moisture, you hang on a peg where it will drip a small, persistent puddle onto the dirt floor. You splash your face with water from the jug, the shock of it briefly sharpening senses that crave only oblivion. The water runs grey. You are stripping away the river, layer by layer. Then, the bed. The straw pallet rustles as you collapse onto it, a sound like a long, exhausted sigh. The blanket is rough, thin, but it is weight, and weight is a form of comfort. You lie on your back, eyes closed against the thin stripes of morning light slicing through the shutters. This is the final paradox. The world is waking, vibrant and loud, but your body, your mind, are shutting down. You are a creature of reversed cycles. Yet, as you settle, a strange thing happens. The silence of the hut is not true silence. In your ears, beneath the ringing fatigue, the river is still there. Not the sound, but the rhythm. The phantom sensation of the current pushing against the hull, the gentle, rocking sway of the boat in a slow pool, the metronomic splash creak of the oar. It's in your blood, a liquid cadence that even solid ground cannot still. Your heartbeat seems to slow to match it. A mainstream historical fact. This dissociation, this carrying of the work's rhythm into rest, is a documented phenomenon among pre-industrial laborers whose tasks were deeply physical and repetitive. Millers would dream of the turning wheel, weavers of the clacking loom. Your body has become a tuning fork, struck by the night, and it hums the river's frequency long after you've left its banks. As the river's rhythm claims your inner ear, the mental clutter of the night, the secrets, the fears, the fragmented news, begins to detach and drift. They become like the flotsam on the water, seen but not touched, carried away on the current of your receding consciousness. The mother's worry, the apprentice's panic, the willow man's tacit threat, they lose their sharp edges, softening into mere stories, echoes without urgency. The night's work is done. Its burdens are not yours to carry into sleep. You are a conduit, and now the conduit is closed, emptying itself into the quiet reservoir of dreams. And so, as the sun climbs properly, painting bright squares of gold on your dirt floor, you descend. The shouts of a cart drive on the track, the bark of a dog, the scent of bread baking. All these signs of the day world become distant, irrelevant, like events on a far shore. You are already crossing a different, darker, quieter river. Your breathing deepens, slows, sinks with the remembered lap of water against tarred oak. The last coherent thought is not a thought at all, but a sensation. The gentle, yielding resistance of the water as you push the pole in, and the solid, surprising purchase of the riverbed beneath, anchoring you, just before you let go. The long, quiet vigil is over. The echoes of lapping water and creaking oars fade, not into silence, but into the soft, ordinary sounds of your own room, the gentle hum of appliances, the distant sigh of traffic, the reassuring weight of your own blanket. The medieval night, with its palpable dark and tangible spirits, recedes, leaving behind not fear, but a strange, lingering calm. You followed a rhythm older than clocks, a patient dialogue with the dark that asked for endurance, not brilliance. There were no heroes in that boat, only a person doing a job, finding small victories in a safe crossing, a full toll box, a secret kept. That, perhaps, is the most comforting history of all. The reminder that resilience is often quiet, that courage is frequently just showing up, and that even in the deepest night, across the blackest water, there is a rhythm to be found, a pole that will find the bottom, a far shore that will eventually emerge from the mist. The ferryman's shift ends. Yours, in the warm light of a new day, is just beginning. But for now, let the current of sleep take you. Let the memories of cold water and colder stars dissolve into the deep, quiet pool of dreams, where all journeys are smooth and all shores are welcoming.